No, 100%. Like timelines are very weird. The Terrifier 2 and the Cyberpunk 2077 happened 5 years after that album came out.
Yeah,
Like
that's
that, you
crazy.
know what I mean? I'm 3 albums ahead already. And like, it's my first album, that started getting all this shine. What you touched on is like timelines are very, very different. Like some people blow up out the gate, and some people have like 20-year long careers, and then it's a slow burn, and then suddenly they're like, oh, I'm paying my rent by this. There isn't a pop, but it's like they kind of are like, oh, when did I actually am kind of successful and I didn't even like notice.
Today on the show, we are joined by the amazing singer-songwriter Kanga. As of today, Kanga has dropped her brand new album, Under Glass. And as we recorded this interview, you're going to hear me reference a lot her EP, Midnight Horses, which is kind of a big teaser towards this album. And as I praise that EP throughout this interview, I can tell you the album is all that and more. So go check it out. Also, it's amazing to just pick her brain on her history of finding herself as an artist. What is Kanga? How her music got on the Cyberpunk 2077 soundtrack, was featured in Terrifier 2, and around talking about all her momentum. She leaves us with a beautiful message for aspiring artists. And also to let you know, this interview kind of cuts into the meat and bones of our conversation, but prior to what you're going to hear as we were setting up our mics in the recording situation, we just had this very nice talk on a lot of the things people don't see around being a DIY artist. How you can exhaust yourself, miss alarm clocks from working all day and night. And that's something that gets referenced later on in the interview as well. That's why I'm bringing it up right now. But yeah, this was such a great talk, and we're going to get into it right now. It's very cool to meet you. So
Thank
your
you.
latest release, Midnight Horses, that people can check out right now, is kind of my introduction to you. And I even like went back to like some of like your last release and everything, and I'm just totally vibing with these tracks. And I just kind
Yeah,
of want to know like a little bit about like your personal history of music and what kind of
right.
gravitated you to kind of create the sound and persona of Kanga.
Sure. So like the my latest stuff is sort of your introduction into my work. That's actually like really cool to hear because I've been sort of like an underground sort of fixture in like industrial music since, for like a while now. And like my first album was like very, very industrial. And
Mhm.
the crowd that I got was very attached to that sound. Um, and like as my albums progressed, like they became less and less of that vibe, and I've sort of shifted into this new vibe. And there's always a little bit of tension with people who are emotionally attached to a particular sound. And so working on this new music, I'm very like curious to see who's going to resonate with it. So it's kind of nice to be talking to somebody that doesn't have like that perspective of me as like a industrial artist doing something new, but you're kind of hearing where I'm at now, which is like very refreshing. But
Mhm.
in any case, to like answer your question, I have a production background. I have been doing music production and had a stint with a sound design career, and worked on some big name movies as like the composer's assistant. Um, and I always had this dream of combining like all the types of music that I really liked. I was really into like 90s EBM and industrial and experimental stuff, but also like pop music and dance music and, sort of female fronted kind of things that I never really found anything that like scratched the itch, you
Mhm.
know? at least like contemporarily. Um, and so when I first started out, I wanted to kind of stay on the production side, and I would just like look for artists to work with. And when I was really young, like back in the SoundCloud days, I had like a couple songs that pop off there, but I didn't have
Oh,
any
cool.
vocals on it. And then so one day I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna like take a stab at singing. And then I, threw some vocals on some tracks, and connected with a great producer who Reese Fulber, who, mixed and co-produced my first album. Um, and it did really well. And I was sort of like thrown into this position of uh being like doing something that I wasn't familiar with, which was like singing and being a front woman, when I just kind of wanted to be like a producer and write tracks. But then when I feel like I found like my rhythm in that. And so I really just leaned into it, and now I want to be a pop star.
That's awesome. And you know what? It's
Yeah.
kind of cool to hear like you started off with the production and then
Yeah.
maybe looking for vocalists and then just having that epiphany. It's like, hey, like let's do it myself too. And you can always like, I don't know, just fast track your vision in a way when you take that leap, and whether it takes like a learning curve or whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah, your voice is awesome. And especially like listening to like your early tracks like Going Red, I noticed like that was on like had like a million like
Yeah.
Spotify listens, and just the contrast of like I
Yeah.
love like the industrial, like the heaviness with like
Mhm.
just like a nice like female voice or something like that
Yeah.
kind of triggers my brain where I'm like, oh, this is sick, like type of
Yeah.
vibe and everything.
Yeah. I mean, my early stuff, I didn't know how to sing at all. So if you listen to that album, I'm just, and it all goes red. Like I'm sitting here like, check my vital signs. Like I'm not actually really singing. I'm just sort of like, okay, I know how to write a hook because I'm a
Hmm.
producer, right? Like I know how to write a hook, but I don't know how to sing. So I just sort of like sat in my voice and like, I like your viciousness. It's all the same right here. And then um and I think that like worked for, it has sort of like a coldness, like a cool, cold distantness,
Hmm.
that like worked with that type of music. But I really knew in my heart that like if I wanted to grow as an artist, then I would actually have to learn how to sing and do something like more vocally interesting. And I found that as I went in that direction, I focused less on making like bangers and more on making more sort of like, I don't even want to say pop, but like, tracks that were more songwriting.
Hmm.
They're still dancey, but it's less of just that like four on the floor, heavy sucker punch you in the face.
Yeah.
Um, and it kind of divided people. There were people that were like, "Oh my God, it's so cool. You can see this progression as an artist." And then there were people that were like, "We want like the club hits."
Yeah,
And
they're like, I want to bang my head. But
yeah, and that's valid. But I
yeah.
have the album for that. So like listen
Hmm.
to that, you know what I mean? So
Yeah, and
yeah,
even live, like you can mix it up, like have a whole
yeah.
experience. One musician I admire, he's from Vancouver. His name is Devin Townsend, and he used to be in like a brutal heavy band, and
Hmm.
then like started doing solo stuff where it goes to like ambient, like dance
Yeah.
music, and it took like a couple albums, but then people just kind of followed and just kind of
Um,
liked him for his creativity, and then after a while like you see him live, it's a variety show and it's
yeah,
awesome. And
I
I
love
feel like if
that.
you have that in your heart, like go for it too, especially if it's
Yeah.
naturally coming out of you and everything.
Yeah. I mean that I'll check him out because I completely relate to that progress. And like all of the artists that have had like the biggest creative impact on me are all artists that like make a different album each time.
Hmm.
And and I see that it's hard to carry the popularity, but the fan base seems to tap into the true creative process of that artist. And that's where you get like these fan bases that are like so supportive and like actually love you and
They're
are
gonna be
not,
lifers.
yeah, and they're not looking for bangers. Like they already have your bangers and they like want to hear what you have to say and what you have to go through, and they love the story. And I think that there are bands and artists that make the same album over and over again and people eat that shit up, but it's
Mhm.
like and that's wonderful. That's just a different type of artist than me, you
Yeah,
know.
it's really cool.
So,
And it's cool to kind of hear your background also, like you mentioned, like in more like a cinematic type of production with sound too.
yeah, for
And
sure.
I don't know if this was consciously on Midnight Horses, but I noticed too, even like the way the track list kind of flows together, it kind of has like a build up and stuff,
Yeah.
almost like whether the lyrics relate or not, the music kind of feels like it takes you on this journey. Was that like a conscious thing going on?
Yeah, actually, so I'm a heavy album person. I love
Hmm.
albums. So when I make music, I always write with two things in mind. How is it going to be performed live and how is it going to sit in an album? So when I'm like writing an album, I make these songs and I start piecing together like where I think uh each song sort of relates to the other. Um and so I'm always kind of keeping that in mind a little bit because I really like the experience of sitting down and listening to an album and being taken on a journey. Um, and we don't like live in album times, you know, we live in streaming singles and stuff like that. But the people who are listening to your album, it's like I kind of feel like you need to like reward them, you know, like take them on a little bit of a journey. And so yeah, I'm very happy that you picked up on that because
Yeah.
that's something that I'm very like conscious about when I write.
I love it too. Yeah, and you did mention like nowadays, and even like I've known some people who got signed to record labels too, and they're all about like the singles and blah blah blah, almost like to the point where they're having internal debates from executives like of like just in their heart wanting to make an album, but it's
Yeah,
like I don't know, just like the way the algorithms are and all that stuff.
yeah,
So it's very refreshing to hear you just like kind of want to do that process just as an artist too, because it might
yeah.
even be like because of I'm also in my 30s too, the generation we came from and
Mhm.
like
For
how
sure, for
we would
sure.
consume music. And I
Right.
love having like a big piece of like a bunch of tracks and just
Yeah,
sitting down and taking some time instead of getting like the quick fix and then
right.
done, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty young when like iPods came out, but I remember like you had to manually sort of like create playlists and it was like here's the workout playlist and here's the sad playlist and here's the thing, but it was like it like took work and you really had to like curate it and
Hmm.
um like but you still had like the like your comfort albums, you know,
Yeah.
like you had like the albums that you went as like security blankets, you know. um and like I just think that that was so important for me. I get why things have changed and I get why uh streaming is the way that it is, but it's also really hard to measure success when you
Hmm.
live in a single streaming kind of thing because the algorithm will feed the singles and you'll get a lot of listeners for singles, but they're not people who are listening to the albums.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's really hard to figure out like what is actually hitting. You know,
Yeah.
does that make sense?
It's definitely makes sense too. And almost
Yeah.
like I see something similar on the podcast side. Like a lot of
Mhm.
my big things would get like hits from making clips and
Right,
stuff like that. And maybe like a clip will get like 100,000 views, but it doesn't mean like everybody's going back and
right,
listening to the whole conversation
right.
I'm having,
Yeah.
you know? It's
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess it's just so much information going so fast, and like people are
Yeah.
conditioned to TikTok just being on the infinite scroll, or
Yeah.
Spotify playlists, like on to the next. But it's interesting times, but you're actually like you're absolutely killing it right now. And
Oh, thank
even
you. Oh my
even like
gosh.
I wanted to mention too, on this album too, Bad Girl, it was featured on the Cyberpunk game and in Terrifier, am I correct as
Oh
well?
no, those are two different songs. So
Oh,
going
okay, my bad.
Red-
Apologies for
no,
that.
it's okay. Going Red was on Cyberpunk 2077. And
Nice.
then so that was, and then Machine was in Terrifier 2.
Ah, okay.
So
I did like a Google search and somebody gave me the wrong information
oh, it's
there.
okay. I mean I totally get that. I think Bad Girl might have been put on like some playlist, so maybe there was some sort of, I don't know. I put it out in the world and I'm like, you guys figure it out because like
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't even know Going Red was in Cyberpunk 2077.
Wow.
Like
And you know what's
no one told me.
that's insane. And you know what's
Yeah,
so like cool, like or even I feel like the times have changed where like a lot of younger people, they're not getting their music from the radio anymore. It's like
yeah,
I hear so much from like video games, and that was
for sure.
such a high selling, I think 20 million copies like
Yeah.
off the jump type of thing. And to have your song in there, but that's so interesting to me that you didn't know it was in there. Like just they
Yeah,
just
well, because
jacked
it's
it,
like,
or
no, because it's not in the, how do I put it? It's not in the actual game, but
Mhm.
the game has an official soundtrack.
Ah, okay.
And the soundtrack, because it's like not in the game, you don't have to license it. So you don't have to like hit up publishing or licensing or anything like that. You can literally just like go, like they have like their Spotify, like their official Spotify, and then they add the tracks that are in the soundtrack. And so
Ah,
because there's no licensing, like it's literally just like a glorified like Spotify playlist basically, but it's put
okay.
together by the game. So
Yeah, I see.
so it's like I basically like, had this and it's all, it was like health and like, all of these like big bands, and then, they added mine and I didn't even know until like somebody was like, "Oh my God, you're on the like playlist soundtrack." And I was like, that's so cool.
Yeah,
Um
definitely. Just to
but
get
that's
like oh,
oh
good.
no,
Sorry to cut you off. Yeah.
no, I mean, I was just gonna say like, but that's why everything is so different with streaming, because with streaming you don't even need like publishing or licensing like to do something, which is actually kind of cool. Like you can sort like a big game can be like, well, here's our soundtrack. You can't buy it, so we don't need to license it, but you can stream, the 5 million people that follow it online can stream it.
Hmm.
So
And
it's
for
very
like an
weird
artist, that's like that's good advertising too. If some people just
for
want that
sure.
vibe because it fits the vibe of the game. And even I feel like just that darker industrial synth wave. I got introduced to that type of scene from video games like 10 years
Yeah.
ago. There was a game called Hotline Miami, and it
Yeah.
introduced me to Carpenter Brut and like a bunch of like other artists in that circle too. So even like going
Um,
to hear like Going Red, it reminded me of that game. And if they ever like hear about, or if I ever hear about them making a sequel, I'm gonna just start spamming them. I'm like, put Kanga in your game. Like
hell
it's like it
yeah.
just
Hell
like
yeah.
fits that vibe like perfectly and everything.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean that album, just like that was all for my first album, and it had so many uh it's just, yeah, I'm so thankful that it had that. And like I said, I'm kind of moving in a different direction, but there's also like something else that I have in the oven that I haven't really
Nice.
talked about yet, which kind of is gonna be like going back to a little bit more of that side, but
Exciting.
I can't talk about it
Yeah,
yet.
awesome. Well, when it does come out, we will share the shit out of it and everything. But
Thank you.
yeah, and even like a lot of people listen to these segments and they're like kind of aspiring creators themselves. And as somebody who's kind of I don't know, just like I think it's cool like how DIY and self-made of a musician you are. Would you have any like advice for somebody who's kind of got all these ideas and they're trying to put them together or take the next step from out of their recording studio or anything?
Mhm. Um, so I'm still trying to figure that out myself. I think that there's one thing which is you can make music that is purely artistic and purely for yourself, and it's art, um and it's going to live inside of your head and live inside of your heart. And it when you tie yourself emotionally to that, you can get really frustrated with other people not picking up on that. Because you're like, how is this not relating? This is so good. But oftentimes with art, you're having a conversation with yourself. And having a conversation with yourself doesn't necessarily translate to having a conversation with other people.
Mm,
So I think that a lot of people take it really personally when they make something that they're super proud of and it just doesn't hit. And so what I would say it like from sort of being a professional creative is that you kind of have to know what you're trying to say and what you're trying to do. Because a lot of people are just sort of like, this is my creative energy and it's so good and I'm putting it out there and people will have to like it because it's so good. Um, but it's like if you're coming from a place of just having like a conversation with yourself, um, you're gonna get the few people that are gonna love you and are gonna love that conversation, but it's gonna be really hard to get out there.
mhm,
So I just tell people who are kind of like coming into it, like, what's your goal? Like, what's your objective? Do you want to be this truly like 100% yourself, don't care what anyone else thinks artist, or are you trying to make something that is like more relatable for wider audiences? Um, and I think like going into that, not really knowing what you're trying to do or what you're trying to say causes people like a lot of emotional like just tension, you
mhm, yeah,
know?
definitely.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean just like get really good at what you're trying to do, and then figure out who you're talking to. Are you talking to yourself and you want a couple people to sit in on that, or are you trying to talk to a lot of people, and what are you going to say if that's the case?
Mhm, yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's
that's
kind of
definitely no,
my
that's true. And I love like how introspective you got with that too, because that is like a constant thing with like creatives too. They can take they could maybe like work on something for months, and they put it
yeah.
out there and it's doesn't get the result they want and
Yeah.
almost like take it personally, but
Yeah. It's
I
hard
don't
not
know.
to. Of course you
Yeah,
would.
definitely, definitely. And I even noticed from early days of doing like these interviews too, it's like the same thing. And but if you stay consistent, true to yourself, like sometimes it's a slower burn that way, but
Yeah.
people will find it after time, and
Sure.
enjoy it. It's just you can be making great stuff, but it's not like reaching whether it's like the right ears or
Yeah.
eyes or if you're a filmmaker or whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I
I like
mean,
what you said.
no, 100%. Like timelines are very weird. The Terrifier 2 and the Cyberpunk 2077 happened 5 years after that album came out.
Yeah, that's
Like that, you
amazing.
know what I mean? I'm 3 albums ahead already. And like, it's my first album, that started getting all this shine. Um, yeah, I mean, that's a great point. Another like what you touched on is like timelines are very, very different. Like some people blow up out the gate and some people have like 20-year long careers and then it's a slow burn and then suddenly they're like, oh, I'm paying my rent by this. There isn't a pop, but it's like they kind of are like, oh, when did I actually am kind of successful and I didn't even like notice. Um,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's hard to not compare yourself to other people, but you should keep in mind that, timelines are very different. So
Yeah, most definitely. And you can often get too much in your own head. And I like what you said too. It's just like how almost like sometimes you don't even notice the growth because you're so
yeah.
deep into it. And yeah, me and a videographer buddy of mine, we just had a conversation where we met like 10 years ago and what we're doing now too. And just like talking about the
Yeah.
stuff we're stressed about now, being like, yo, I would have killed to have this stress like
Yeah,
back then, it's like,
100%.
yo, what happened? It almost kind of gave like a sense of pride. But like if you're in it for
Yeah,
the long game and stay consistent, doesn't matter what your art form, I believe, like things will
yeah,
start happening and moving in your way.
for sure. I mean, I'm so glad you brought that up because we were talking about how I was just so tired and overwhelmed, and I slept through, our last meeting. And I
Yeah.
was like, God damn it, like, I'm so stressed out. I'm so tired all the time. And then I was like, I don't have a day job right now because I get to like do this. Like
Hmm.
I got to sleep in because I don't have a day job that I needed to wake up for because I am like doing this. Like that is like so cool.
Yeah.
I'm burnt out from doing this instead of burnt out like bartending or burnt out from like working a 9 to 5. Like that's so cool that I'm burnt out from this.
Yeah, you're literally like living the dream. Like the things that you wanted to happen are happening too. And I'm happy you got your rest that day. I totally understand. That
I'm
if you
glad.
didn't wake up from an alarm, that means it's needed. Like sometimes
I
too, like I feel like you can get so caught up in the grind where you're just
Yeah.
become unhealthy. And like I'm a sucker for
Yeah.
that too. And I need to remind myself it's like okay to turn off because also with what you do, there's no like end goal. It's like infinite, like you can always work on
Yeah.
something any time of day or
Yeah.
like tweak. Like it's
Yeah.
crazy. So yeah, like every once in a
Yeah.
while we gotta have
100%.
a reminder to just breathe.
Yeah, it's on the whiteboard.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
breathe is like on the whiteboard.
I hope you got some blank
Um,
days where it's just like, nope, I'm just gonna.
I have to like squeeze it in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. There's no end goal. And like when I was like first starting out, I think it was sort of like I want to be at this level and I want to tour this much and I want to have this many people at my shows, and that was sort of like this pie in the sky, like sort of like I'm not going to make it until I'm like right here. And everyone gets down about their careers because everyone wants more listeners, everyone wants more people at their shows. And so it's like, I'm not at that place when I was younger that I thought would be making it, but I'm at that place where I'm like I'm paying my rent
Yeah,
and
it's
I'm
so
like
cool.
selling tickets and I have like music and video games and stuff, and but you don't really see it on the day to day,
Mhm. Yeah,
it's like you just yeah,
and it's almost like you keep moving your own bar of like, oh, if I get here, this will be success. And
yeah,
then the next step, it's just like, but I still haven't done this. But sometimes you got to step
yeah,
back and just be proud of the whole journey. And yeah, I think like
yeah.
what you're doing is awesome. I'm a brand new fan. If you ever
Thank
like play
you.
shows in Canada or Toronto area, I'll definitely
Yeah.
come out and check that out. And
I was just there a year ago, but I'm hoping
oh
to
damn, I'm a year too
yeah, you're
late.
too late. But I'll be back because it's new album is coming out, which means new touring cycle, and I'm my label is based out of Canada, so and my mom is like half French Canadian, so I'm like
Cool,
trying
cool.
to get over to East Canada as much as I can anyway. So
Oh, amazing. Yeah. And yeah, when that happens again, I'll bring some people out. I know like a bunch of people who will vibe to your tracks as well. And
oh yeah,
yeah, even I noticed you said you got something else going on that you can't talk about, but maybe
yeah.
to leave us, like how do you feel about like Midnight Horses finally being out and getting into people's ears?
Um, I mean it's great. It was the first time that we've rolled out like so many singles. So basically it was like we had because the album is called Under Glass, and we rolled out I think like five, maybe six singles in the course of a year. So we basically like released almost half of the album before the album came out. And we chose the singles that like we thought, would be popular, but also that were sort of like a smorgasbord of like what the album is. Um, and it's like very interesting to see like what songs people seem to like respond to the most. Like Rehab was like the one that like the old fans attached themselves to because it was like the most like industrial. And then like Magnolia was the one that it was the first one that rolled out where people were like, oh, she's doing something different. And it got like the attention. And then Bad Girl was like, oh, this is like a 90s bop,
Mm-hmm.
like I got those people that don't like industrial music, but like the Kylie Minogue, like, sort of like dancey vibe. And the Midnight Horses is like kind of a taste of like, oh, there's some like band tracks on the album too. Like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
there's like some new shit going on. So I was really excited about how people were like responding to the tracks. Um, and I hope that when the album comes out and when people listen to it from start to finish, they'll hear the cohesion instead of hearing like the six kind of different tracks that came out. They'll actually hear like the progression that happens in the album. Uh, so yeah, it's like it's a very different schedule or like process that I've ever done before release. So it's an experiment basically.
Yeah, that's awesome and exciting times, and it's awesome to just kind of hear how pure it kind of came from like your soul in a way, like just like it was just something you felt like you needed to do, even though you built this fan base who wants to bang their head against the wall to like
Yeah,
to like the industrial going red type of stuff. But I love that you kind of did what you just felt like you needed to do, and I really commend that. And yeah,
thank
congrats
you.
on the release.
Thank you. Yeah, the other thing that I can't talk about at all
Mhm.
comes from I made the decision to go for my Kanga stuff to go more singer-songwriter and more uh like in this vein. Um
Okay.
I thought it was very important. Like for me in my heart, I was like, Kanga has to do that's like my heart and soul, like what I'm doing in the moment. And if I'm going in the singer-songwriter kind of direction, that's what's going to happen. But there is that other part of me that is
Mm.
the dark side.
Ooh,
And
cliffhanger.
yeah, so and I was like, that's not dying. That is so I that thing is doing its own thing over here, and I'm just as excited about that.
Oh,
So,
let's
but I can't
fucking
talk about
go. Yeah, I love
it.
it. Well,
Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm
yeah.
excited for everything, but that I kind of, even though I can't talk about it, I wanted to put it out there because there are a lot of people that are like, oh, I miss like when she was like heavier, and I'm like, no, 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 no.
Yeah. It's
It's
still part of you.
that's not going away. Like, don't worry about that. It's just, it'll be a
Yeah.
different, yeah, yeah. So in any case, that's all I wanted to say.
Oh, I love it. And you know what? Hopefully around that drop we can catch up again. But yeah, Kanga, it's so great
Definitely.
to meet you. And thank
Likewise.
you.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
the great talk today. And
Of course.
as you continue to release stuff, we'll continue to share it. And yeah, once again, new fan. Hope to see you sometime in the future.
Absolutely. Yes, it would be lovely to see you in Toronto. And yeah, thank you for the lovely conversation.
Boom! Thanks again to Kanga. That was so fun meeting you, picking your brain, learning about your heart and soul. And like we mentioned, Under Glass is out now wherever you can listen to music. Go check that out immediately. After you subscribe to this channel, of course, or follow on the Spotify's. We'll have a link to that in the description. And like every artist we talk to, we'll continue to share their stuff. Follow the journey. I feel like Kanga has so many adventures ahead. It was very cool to meet her. And beyond that, I fucking love the music. Also, let me know if you're checking her out for the first time and what did you think? of this interview, the album, etc., etc. And before we go, we cannot leave without thanking all you legends on the Patreon page. First up, our boy Mike Carniello of the Testing with Mike YouTube channel. If you're into technology, electronics, how they work, and most importantly, how to fix them, go check out Testing with Mike on YouTube. And also, the lovely Amanda McKnight of Top 10 Nerd and her very own Amanda McKnight YouTube channel. Definitely subscribe to that. If you're looking for great vibes and coverage of comic books, video games, superhero movies, and all things nerdy. That's Amanda McKnight on YouTube. And another shout out to the wonderful Jenny Potter, the legendary Devin McBride, Ryan frickin' Campbell, my favorite soul singer, Saber, and last but not least, Francis Coffer, aka my mom. If you want to shout out at the end of every one of these episodes and get them early, raw, and uncut right when I'm done, I take the Zoom call and I post it immediately. You can go to patreon.com/thecreative-imbalance. And beyond supporting the show and having my thanks, you'll be able to go to bed at night, sleep soundly, knowing you're a badass motherfucker who supports raw, uncut, independent media. And nobody can take that away from you. You hear me? And with that being said, we got a lot of new talks coming your way. Thanks for rocking with me, and we'll catch you next time.